Hello, everyone. Great to see you. This is the School of Video Game Audio. My name is Leonard Paul, and this is Halberstadt. And we're looking forward to chatting to her today to ask tons of questions about game audio stuff, all the neat things that happen over in A Shell in the Pit and possibly otherwise, and really dig in to see what, you know, people do over there, and including M. So I'll allow you to do your intro rather than me to try and dig into that. So what we'll do is we'll do a little bit of history about yourself and sort of where you got started, where you're at, and where you are currently. So yes, please. Hello, M.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I really appreciate it, and thank you everyone else for being here too. Um, I am Em, and I'm a creative director at A Shell in the Pit. And I've been with this company for 6 years now, 6 years in March, actually. And in that time, I've worked on about 20 games. Some of the ones that you might recognize are Untitled Goose Game, Night in the Woods, Chicory, Parkitect, Fantastic Contraption. Um, and yeah, so we're a sound design company, and we work with developers from all around the world, often locally here in Vancouver, but we provide sound design, and we provide technical audio if the game needs it. We have a couple people that do programming and can hook the sounds up. And we are focused on ethical and sustainable practices as a company. So we don't crunch, and we really like to have a good work life balance. Um, so yeah, that's where I am now. And I'll talk a little bit about how I got here. So I started out, I guess it was in high school, just with a strong interest in visual storytelling through video editing. And I just made a lot of home movies, and that led me to want to apply at Ryerson University for a program that was called New Media. And that program was really focused on interactive art and making installations, and they taught some programming. So I got a little bit of background in a lot of the elements that games have. Um, and I didn't really learn about sound design as a thing until there was just this one class called I think it was Introduction to Sound Design or something, and I found it really exciting to learn about Foley in particular. I thought it was so cool that you could perform an action with an object and have it evoke exactly what you need, and that the object could be whatever. It doesn't have to be what the sound is making. And I started doing a lot of research into the perception of sound, which I just thought it was so cool that you can manipulate people subconsciously with sound. Um, so those two elements led me to become interested. I heard the words interactive audio, and I thought that was kind of a combination of everything that I'd learned so far. I didn't really play many games growing up. I played Guitar Hero and the Hobbit video game, but not much else outside of that. So it never really occurred to me that it could be a job. Um, I think the first time I really considered it was after I played Limbo and realized that there was this whole other world of indie games I kind of had assumed, which I think a lot of people still do, that video games are, shooters and all of that stuff, which I wasn't as interested in. So that led me to I was in Toronto at the time, and I applied at VFS. So I traveled across the country on a train to Vancouver, and I went to school there for a year. And that program was a lot. It was a little bit focused on film, which I wasn't as interested in. Um, the School of Video Game Audio would be a more concise way to get the information. But I learned a lot there, and I met a lot of really cool people, and that kind of got me into my first job in sound, which was at a film sound studio doing ADR recording, which was very challenging for me because it's a people job, and the thing that I really loved was editing, which is not a people job. um, but while I was there, I just kept looking into how I could immerse myself in the community, because in Vancouver there's a really active sound community and indie community. So that's how I eventually met Gord, who is the director at A Shell in the Pit, and he started the company. I was the first person he hired after we contracted for a while. And yeah, one of the first games I worked on was Night in the Woods, which was really intimidating because I hadn't worked on any video games. And at the time when I started, it was already pretty popular. I started with about a year left in its development. But I think we ended up being able to work on that game because partially because they sent us a mock up, and I was able to just go nuts on it and do a lot of recording. And I think the unique and quirky aspect of the mock-up kind of just resonated with what they wanted the game to be. And at the time, it was partially because I didn't have very many libraries, but a lot of those sounds, it was like UI with my voice and performing footsteps on a guitar string to be the power lines if you walk on the power lines, and it changes in pitch based on where you are in the line. And those kinds of things ended up in the game eventually as well. And that's kind of been like a theme of my work, I would say, is just always trying to record first before looking in a library. I find for myself can be a lot faster, and I like that. It's the same thing that I found when I first learned about Foley, is that you can just make exactly what you need, and it's this unique thing to it. I did that for Untitled Goose Game as well. I recorded most of the props, just dropping all the objects on the grass or the concrete, a lot of discrete prop sounds. So it took a long time, but I find that part of it pretty fun. And yeah, since then I've worked on Wandersong. That was one of my earlier games, and Parkitect as well. Fossil Echo, Ikenfell, and the Museum of Other Realities, which was really exciting for me because it related a lot to what I was in school in new media for. It's a virtual reality art gallery that you can go online with friends. You have your avatars and you experience the art gallery together, but it's a lot cooler than in real life because you can go into the paintings and into the sculptures and all that stuff. And I ended up doing a piece myself there. It's a sound piece that has a little bit of a sculpture element to it as well. And yeah, I also have got to continue doing video editing. I've started doing trailers on some of the games that I've worked on. I started doing that with Wandersong, and more recently, I did all the trailers for Chicory, which we released last year, which is a game about creativity and painting. And that one as well, I did a lot of recording for. that I actually recorded paint and paint mixed with a little bit of glue. And yeah, so I'm currently working on, we're finishing up a couple games. One is I Was a Teenage Exocolonist, and another is called Chia. I'm working on those games with the rest of the team. We are we have grown a lot and are currently 12,
Oh, wow.
which is still small, but considering 6 years ago we were two,
Mm-hmm.
seems pretty good. And yeah, I think that's about the gist of my history. I probably missed a few things, but yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's I find that with my own work as a sound designer that yeah, I really like recording original sounds too, and I think that I try to sort of do a parallel between like music and seeing the performance of doing, like sound recording and Foley, and then figuring out how to make that a creative sound design process is very sort of like you say, like manipulating people's emotions, and it's kind of like even like sneakier than music because music people are like, oh hey, I understand like minor chords and stuff, but then with sound design, it is a real thing, especially like with, ambiances or all the sounds in the game to allow you to
Mm-hmm.
really sort of underscore using sounds, sort of the emotional sort of direction that you want to point people. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that comes across a lot in the work that you've done. I mean, you've obviously received a lot of attention for certain games. We've got people on the chat. They're like, "Hey, congrats on Untitled Goose Game and other things." I know that for Chicory, I saw a post that you did about all the paint recording that you had done, which
Mm-hmm.
was pretty fascinating. It's a lot of work. Like, how? I mean, it's probably for people that haven't seen it. Sort of like, can you outline sort of your process for recording the paint sounds? Like how you sort of iterated on different things, maybe things that didn't work that you thought would work, and then things that did work that eventually made it into the game.
Sure, yeah. That that process was one of the most fun times I've had recording for a game for sure. It was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of just experimentation with what I could find in my fridge that was kind of thick and gloopy.
Yeah.
And then I ended up just wanting to kind of be true to the like painting theme, even though I know it's not a gloopy sound is a gloopy sound, but I ended up just going with paint, and I did mix a bit of glue in there to get it a little bit thicker.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a big bowl, and I spread out a bunch of paper, and just recorded all the sounds I could think of making with the paint. A lot of the time, I would kind of make those air bubble suction sounds by doing the like
Mm-hmm.
this thing.
Yeah.
And I recorded a lot of those and ended up going in and creating kind of a palette with it
A
and
sonic palette.
yeah, both.
Yeah, exactly, both.
And using that for most of the game, I just kind of went through the whole recording and cut out all the bubbles that sounded everything that sounded like a bubble and everything that sounded more like a suction. And I grouped them together and then
Mhm.
used them for the different UI sounds and actions that you could do in the game. Um, the stuff that was harder was the actual painting sound. It was
Mm.
difficult to get something that uh, didn't sound gross because a lot of people
Um,
do not like wet sounds. So
yeah.
yeah, that was challenging. It took a lot of layering and testing out on people and that kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think that there's, folks that have like a specific, like it's quite visceral for them, like they get nauseated by certain types of sound. And
Yeah.
was that something that you addressed like in the game for people that were okay with those kind of sounds and people that weren't, or did you just try and address to make less people in a sense like sick? Like how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so uh we heard about like misophonia, which is
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the people that have like a more visceral reaction to the sounds. And so all we did was just put any wet sound in a bus in a group together
Mm-hmm.
and added a setting that those particular sounds can be turned off if they're bothering you. And people really liked that. I wasn't really expecting it to get noticed very much. I thought like, oh, a
Mm-hmm.
couple people would resonate with it, but yeah, it was really
Hmm.
popular. And I thought that was good because although it means that like less people are hearing my work, it also means that more people can hear the rest of the work rather than just
Right.
muting all the sounds. I think it's
Yeah.
nice to give those options.
Yeah, and I think as a creative director slash sound designer, that it can be tricky to go like, well, this is like my what I want to do creatively, but then also taking into consideration obviously the audience is really important.
Hmm.
And yeah, having that sort of that is a very interesting approach to allow for both. I know that there's been throughout the years a lot of discussion of like, oh, do you allow people to like change the music levels and stuff like this, and like you got
Hmm.
people that are like, no, you can't touch the music because like you can't touch the music like in a music mix for like a film, and that's just like that's the stuff I've composed and it's at the right level and stuff. But I sort of tend to take a bit of a more moderate kind of like, well, to me the audio is just meant to support the design, and
Yeah.
90 whatever 95% of the people are not going to touch the levels, and
Yeah,
then for the people
totally.
that do, then it's fine. Those are so I think that that kind of listening to your audience is actually a good thing, and making
Totally.
sure, yeah, that yeah, it's an interesting thing though. I know that for the game that I'm working on, it's a little bit more obvious, but like on the visual side of things, it's called Eco, and it's like a so it's you just basically play usually online, and it's sort of geared towards sort of high school students to balance the environment and the economy. So you sort of figure out things by doing. But we have spiders in the game,
Hmm.
and those really freak people out. So there is a spider, like
Yeah,
arachnophobia button, where you can just click it and then you don't get any spiders. So we haven't
that's
figured out,
good.
we haven't hit anything so far that's to do with audio specifically. We when working on the mining sounds, because it's there's a lot of like sort of grinding and getting whatever mining stuff, and that was really difficult to balance out those sounds where it's like you want to
Hmm.
have the vibe of mining where like that sound is like really harsh, metal on
Hmm.
rock. But then to try and figure out how to design it so that people can be playing the game for hours on end and mining. At the beginning, people were like, "Oh my gosh," because I switched the sounds and they were just like not having it. So I really had to like basically like take the attack off of all of them, low pass them, and also just make sure not to pick any ones that were really scrapey, because yeah,
Yeah.
they yeah, people can be really sensitive to especially like certain sort of mid to high frequencies, and also because they were I'm a little bit older now. Like the high school students, their hearing range goes quite high, and so if you hit
Hmm.
those upper frequencies, like I might not necessarily be able to hear them as much, but yeah, they were
Totally.
quite visceral for younger people, and it was like it is an interesting thing to. I think it's just important to continue to listen to your audience and yeah, hear what they have to say about your work.
That's something that I think is like probably at the forefront when I'm designing sound is how yeah, how it's gonna sound to people and like all that stuff you were talking about, like being really aware of the frequencies. I like to think of it as trying to make the listening experience pleasant for people. And I talk about like those trying to make those specific sounds, especially the ones that are higher frequencies, more soft. So I tend to use, yeah, high frequencies pretty sparingly, as much as possible anyway. I think
Yeah,
that's a great thing to do.
yeah, and also you know as audio folks, a lot of the times we have kind of like nice audio rigs, but for some people, especially listening to like with like cheaper headphones, like earbuds, yeah, like when listening on those, it's kind of like, oh, okay, now I know what you're hearing, because that's just like incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
I don't tend to A B my stuff that much anymore. I kind of have a bit of a better idea of like just from the, whatever the equipment that I have, that it's just like same thing. Don't try not to just be judicious and also just careful about high frequencies, because they can be, and also low frequencies, but primarily high
Yeah.
frequencies can be really, really problematic. Yeah, yeah, it's cool that you went through VFS. I used to teach there for about 5 years, and that was honestly exactly what you were saying. No knocks, like, how do you say? Maybe objective criticism about VFS. It's like, it's very expensive. They
Hmm.
are obviously focused on film. I started the game audio curriculum there back in, I don't know, whatever. I did it for 5 years. I think it was in 2007 I started. And yeah, like being a teacher was actually quite difficult to sort of work against the system in a way, or like work within the system of
Hmm.
film to actually put out stuff that was like, no, like it's important for people to know a little bit about like, programming ish type stuff. And then there was a lot of people that were on the film that were like, no, I don't want to learn any of that. And it's like,
Yeah.
it was a bit of a, sort of a struggle. And yeah, similarly with the cost I think is justified when, because you can get contacts specifically within Hollywood and other places. Like, it's out of all the places, I would sort of recommend, whatever, the sound design campus there, in
Hmm.
comparison to other places that I've heard of. The instructors really care a lot, but yeah, it's a lot of money. And if you're looking for game audio stuff, that is one of the main reasons that I started the School of Video Game Audio, like, well, almost 10 years ago now, is to help people out and really to try and democratize it a little bit, like be able to reach out to people in different countries from different backgrounds
Hmm.
that can tell different stories. And I think that that's, it's a similar sort of, the diversity thing, I think, is really important from an artistic standpoint, which, I think is, something that, well, I know it's something that's supported by your studio as well. So yeah, maybe if you want to talk
Yeah.
a little bit about sort of like the diversity angle and also the ethical and sustainable side of things that you're really fostering and growing at your company.
Yeah. So diversity has always been something that we're striving towards. It's something that it's like definitely needs a lot of effort and is kind of hard to do, but is really, really worth it when you have all of these different perspectives. It just makes working so much more, I don't know, cohesive and exciting and um, a lot easier than just having like one homogenized view. And so a lot of the time you know, we're saying now that like we are just looking for people who we can help make our team more diverse right now because sometimes you get a lot of applicants that are, a white male who is like what the sound design industry is obviously dominated by. But yeah, you kind of have to just keep trying to do that. Um, and in terms of the sustainable and like ethical part of it, I think for me anyway, the main thing is just that we're so focused on making sure that everyone working with us is like doing well and is happy. And a big part of that for me is that I don't feel like I ever have to do crunching or work overtime. Can if I want to, but I really value my time outside of work. I don't. Whenever I'm not working, I'm really not working. Like
Mm-hmm.
I really like going camping and doing all this stuff. And I think that doing that and having that life balance makes me a lot more productive at work and just happier to do what I'm doing now.
Yeah, yeah, and that, like, literally that word sustainable is that thing. It's like it's not just,
Hmm.
environmental sustainability. It's also like, sustainability of one's own health, spiritual, mental, all those things combined together to really, because I think if we have people on the planet that are more focused, like and aware in their bodies that they
Yeah.
exist in space, that will hopefully naturally make it so that, the actions that those people do, possibly, us, the people that are watching as well, that will make choices that are better for not just ourselves but also the planet as well, to bring in sort of, you know, macro sustainability.
Hmm.
And that is something that I've similarly tried to do with the school as well. I thought a lot about what I wanted to do when I was, sort of creating it and how I wanted to put things together. And uh, and I think that that's also another thing, is that, looking at the sort of parallel of, people and the planet, that having a diverse group of people is similar to having like diverse, things that grow in the environment. There's
Hmm.
if you have, the monocrop of, like, like the folks that you were saying, that can be okay for a while, but I think over time, to really have things sustainable for the future and long term, and to have real depth to, like, creative product that, video games can be, I think it's good to have, like, a diversity of opinions and a diversity of
Hmm.
creative input and backgrounds that go into the product itself. Otherwise, you'll simply be growing the same ideas. I'm not saying that first person shooters are horrible, but I mean, like, we have gone through, like the summer kind of blockbustery first person shooter type thing for a while. And like for me,
Hmm.
I I did play a bit of that stuff. I played Half-Life 2, it was fine. I played online and whatnot. But overall, the thing is that I want to, with the school, support people that will hopefully be creating, or at least have the possibility of being creating diverse products, so that we see, game audio and games as like it's like an actual art form. Like, it's not just meant to be commercial product. And so that's
Hmm.
part of the reason why it's great, to chat with you, because it's very obvious with the direction of your company and you being part of it and being a creative director within that company, that that's really important for, that that that's important for your company to pursue, and the products and the kind of projects that you work on, and it just
Hmm.
comes through in the work.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm really interested in just hearing new stories from people, and that's true within our company, and also, yeah, with the developers we work with. I feel really fortunate to have got to work on all these games that are, to me, they have all kind of brought something new to the video game space, and um, said had something kind of a little bit different to say. And yeah, like you said, I know a lot of people enjoy shooters, and that's fine, but I'm just more interested in the something different, but at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think that that comes from a bit of an art-ish kind of background. I mean, my
Yeah.
background is both programming, but I also did like a, music minor here in Vancouver, and yeah, I think that sort of, when you learn about that kind of stuff, and also just, I don't know, whatever, what kind of person you are, that depth and interest in sort of the creative process,
Hmm.
it sticks with you, either for good or
Yeah.
not so good. Because sometimes
Yeah.
I think it can get also in the way a little bit. Like, if you're like over knowledge, sometimes it can be like debilitating. Where it's just like there's certain things that I have needed to unlearn, because I've been like just too reflexive in my own work. Where it's just like,
Hmm.
whoa, what does this mean, and what is the deeper thing of this? And it's just like sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's just like, performing with paint and trying to get like a good, like a good vibe out of that, and
Yeah.
just, whatever, not having your like critical brain on too much too. So yeah.
Totally. And just accepting that I often want to be, putting these impactful stories into the world that will, help change the world for the positive. And I have to always remind myself that, yeah, like I can just be making sounds. It's fine.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll ask you one more question. We have questions coming in from the studio audience, or whatever you want to call it these days. But my last question is, since you were sort of, hire number one and doing creative direction, maybe you can describe a little bit about your role as a creative director, sort of to follow through on what we've been talking about as well, like what you do as a creative director within the company.
Sure, yeah. So the becoming audio directors or creative directors, it happened because as we started to get bigger, we wanted to bring on people who, like, you didn't have to have a ton of experience in games to join our company. So we wanted to be able to basically mentor people for a while, and have people learn within the company. And then we also wanted to have, as more people started working on games, like, I started out, it was just one person working on a game, and it's pretty easy to have like a vision for the game when it's just one person. But we wanted to be able to have a concise vision for each and creative direction for each game. So that's how that came about. And it basically right now means that I, as the director, will create the like design document for the game, and get the inspirations from the developers and make the vision for it. And then I'll usually go in and do captures and audit the captures and come up with a list of all the sounds that we need to do and assign those. Or sometimes our producer, Rachel, will help out with that as well. And then once people start designing, it just means listening to their sounds and giving whatever feedback I think is most important. And there has to be a little balance there between, obviously, not every sound someone makes is going to be exactly what I would have made or what I had in mind, but um, I really try to just have my feedback be something that I think is like really important
Mm-hmm.
for whoever's going to be listening to the game. So often it's like, this sound could be less harsh, like what we were talking about before. I am
Yeah.
always having an ear out for things that will stand out and maybe like take the listener out of the game. Um, but yeah, I think it's important to have, as a director, to have people that you're working with just be able to do what they want, really, and create what they want.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I mean, it's a management role, and I think that the way that you're approaching it is the way a good manager does, where you don't do the job yourself. You're not like, yeah, okay, yeah, this sound, let me get in there, yeah, roll up the sleeves,
Yeah.
and like, it is trying to figure out how to basically make that person as good as they can be with the stuff that they're doing, and then there's like little tweaks along the way, and to
Hmm.
be gracious about the learning process too. And also, I find that in those roles I tend to learn a lot as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because it is one of those things, like if you really are listening and like, oh yeah, I would have never thought of that, and allow that process to go through,
Hmm.
then there's new things that could happen, because you're just like, wow, I would have never done that. And it's really interesting to see where that ended up, rather than sort of squashing those things at the beginning, which it can be difficult, especially when things are high stress, because you're just like, wow, that, yeah, it can be hard to just allow things to happen. And yeah, how do you,
Yeah.
okay, I'll I'll leave questions like, because we'll just keep going, I'll just keep going on. So I'm gonna scroll up here to our viewer questions, and thanks so much for everybody for joining in so far. So I'll do questions from the YouTube chat here. It looks like everything's good there. So Jordan's saying hello. Thomas Pixel Art says hello, everyone. Hi, I've heard Wandersong. Wandersong is awesome. Hello. Okay.
It's
Okay.
awesome.
So this one, this one's from Davis Jordan. It is okay. Is it common for sounds to be made like pitch changing wire steps not to be make it into the game?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Often, I mean, it's always different reasons for whether or not they'll make it in. Often we'll design something before checking with the programmers that it's actually possible to make it in. Like one of the ones that kept happening before I realized I needed to check first was we would always design stop sounds. So the character's walking and then there's a specific sound for when they stop, and that's often just hard to trigger. We'd have to throw those all out, and it's okay. You just get rid of them, and it's not. I don't know. I never try to make it a big deal. Just kind of move on. And then sometimes sounds just won't be working with, it'll be annoying or something. I often, when I'm mixing, is when I listen for the sounds that are just, they pop in, and every time they pop in, it's kind of like, So
Mm.
often those are the ones we'll just go back and do another uh, round on designing. But yeah, it's not the most common. I would say that most of the sounds do make it in, but there are often ones that uh, we have to let go. And I think when that does happen, it's important to just be able to let go and
Hmm.
have greater, the holistic vision of the game is the priority as opposed to your one sound that maybe you spent a lot of time designing, but that was in
Yeah.
the past.
Yeah, and that is the thing too, is to try to be gracious about that project because it can be difficult, when you spend a lot of time working on something.
Hmm.
Like, have you found that when working on sounds and then you start mixing with music, have you found things to be issues there, like, harmonically at all?
Yeah, I had to do a lot of revising on musical sounds and sounds in general, and Wandersong in particular, because Wandersong was a music game. It was all about the music, so I had to learn how to scale back the sounds so they weren't the focus. It's definitely
Hmm.
something to always keep in mind for sure.
Yeah, and say with a music-based game like that, you're using, I'm guessing, Fmod. That seems to be sort of the tool of choice, or.
I do use Fmod
Mm-hmm.
probably more frequently, but
Mm-hmm.
in my games. But on that game, that was in Game Maker, and
Mm-hmm.
at the time, I don't think Fmod was had the capability of being hooked up. So Greg, the developer, actually made an audio implementation tool in Game Maker that's pretty robust, and that I think he actually released it pretty recently, so anyone can use it. If
Ooh.
if anyone needs sound in Game Maker, it's a really good tool.
Yeah, because I typically run into that issue where I want to have the sounds when it's a musical game to try to make it so that the sounds work with the music,
Hmm.
and I find that can be a really big challenge. I'm running into a little bit of that with the mix on Eco, and because the music is adaptive and it will be more adaptive in the future, to try to make it so that the mix will adjust to give music space and vice versa. And then we
Mm.
also have, like, real time chat stuff, which I would also like to have affect the mix. Right now, it just, like, if you're chatting, it just goes right over top and it doesn't interact with any of the audio that's in the background. So,
Mm.
and also streamers can put in their own music. So there's, you know,
Oh
these
yeah.
things I haven't even addressed yet. So I'm just, picking your brain for tips and techniques.
One thing one thing we didn't do this in Wondersong. It would have been really handy in Wondersong, but we did in Chicory is Greg, I don't know how he did it. Um but he coded the system so if you just make uh, a sound in C, in the key of C, it will automatically pitch to match the music in the game no matter what key it's in, which was really cool.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a tricky one. So once again, was that an Fmod or Unity or Game
that
Maker?
that was in the gaming. Yeah, in
Wow.
Chicory Game
Yeah,
Maker.
that's tricky. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah. I have no idea. Don't ask me how he did it.
Yeah. No, that's okay. But those are the things like even just from from a creative standpoint that it's great to have those kind of people on your team. That
Yeah, totally.
that kind of stuff, it really does come through in the final product. Even if people don't like hear it, they do notice that there's like like no tritones or whatever else is normally thrown in there when you
Hmm.
don't sort of take those things into consideration. That is really cool. Nice. Let's get some more questions here. Do. Okay, Solar Studios Films. Hello. Is it possible to work in a video games company without knowing how to program audio? Is it possible to be hired just as the sound and music producer?
Um, yeah, yeah, I think it's totally possible. I would say, I mean, I think it's a really valuable thing. Like if you do like programming, that's great, and a lot of people are looking for that. But I think that a lot of people are just doing the sound design or music. I would say the one thing that is really good to learn is implementing, which I don't really see that as programming. So, um, as personally, I'm not good at programming at all. Like, I know the basics so I can communicate with the programmer, and I think that's also important just to be able to communicate because you are, as a sound designer, working very closely with the programmer to get the sounds in the game. Um, but yeah, learning how to implement the sounds, whether it's Fmod or Wise or um, whatever tool that's inside of Unity, and like being comfortable doing that is important because often developers won't have that much time to go and do all the details that is really important for sound design, like even simple stuff like making a random container, having variations and pitch variation and all that. So if you can do that, it's really helpful.
Yeah, and that as far as a lead out of that one, that is exactly what we do at the school. Is that
Yeah.
we teach implementation stuff. So we teach Wise. We're actually on the Firelight like Fmod Studio website as like a whatever, I guess, friends and family or whatever it is. So we also teach Unity stuff. So that is in C Sharp. So that is more scripty type stuff. And then with Unreal, we do blueprints. So that's like visual scripting. And then Pure Data is kind of like that one's more of creative. It's not really used in video games, but I've added that one because it's more of it's a personal interest of mine. But yeah, we have a
Mhm.
lot of people either wanting to like transition from film into game audio, or they're just starting out and learning implementation. I think it is kind of key if you want basically if you want to compete.
Mhm.
Big name Hollywood sound designers might not need to do it, or but even knowing about it is important. It's kind of like just learning a language as well. It's just that is the language that's spoken in video games, and
Yeah.
yeah, you definitely do not need to code. That's not necessary. Understanding how to speak with the coder kind of in a logical manner, I think, is helpful. But
Mhm.
that is also something that I do have a degree in programming, but I don't pretend that we can teach you how to program in 2 months, which are sort of the lengths of our courses. So yeah, but yeah, you
Yeah.
can. Yeah, and
If you are
mhm.
if you are interested in programming, it's like if you can look at code and it sparks your interest and it doesn't fry your brain like it does with me, it's like I think definitely worth pursuing because I don't know. I always we always need more programming, but yeah, not necessary.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. This one is from Poklyak, and this is to M. How did you figure out what program you wanted to join after undergraduate school? I'm thinking of grad school, but there is virtually no sound design program people at my school.
Um, I found out about VFS. I actually didn't really want to do school at all anymore. After
Yeah.
university, I was pretty done. But then, on a fluke, I think someone else was going to a uh, what is it, a convention when a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of schools are in a room and they try to entice you in.
Mm-hmm.
And VFS was there and they were doing a contest for a scholarship contest. And I just decided to do that. So I kind of just stumbled across it. But honestly, I would recommend the School of Video Game Audio if, unless you are like super keen on doing something in person, or I don't know. Yeah, if you have other reasons, that's fine. But if you want just like a really like concise way to learn about the field, VFS, we were talking about this at the beginning. Like it's not very accessible, but it is a good program. Like they did teach a lot about editing. And if you like wanna, a lot of people that go into the program too, like don't have much background, so they do give you a good foundation. But yeah, I think it depends on what you want, really. There's a lot of options out there. I don't think like to get into video games, grad school or like a big expensive program is really necessary, but if you want it, it's a good option.
Yeah. Yeah, we have students from, they go to different places. There's, I think Leeds has a master's in game sound design, and there's a few other schools that offer that. But yeah, it's also expensive. It's
Mhm.
at this
A lot
sort
of
of,
time too.
it is a lot of time, and that time also equates to money because then you got to live
Mm.
there, unless it's unless you already live in Leeds, or
Yeah.
you want to do the whole thing online, which then you are missing out on sort of a large portion of the networking part of it. Because that was the thing with VFS, is that similar to the
Yeah.
school, is that like bother the instructions, like, or instructors, like that's really where the core of the resource is. Like, yeah, learning the
Hmm.
basics is good, but talking to the instructors after class and like really sort of picking their brain about specific topics and stuff like that, either if you're at VFS or like a university, I think is really key to get the most. Because yeah, I mean, as a teacher, I present sort of the stuff, and then I am really hoping for a lot of questions. And when I don't get questions, I'm like, okay, well, I could just put out more stuff, you know. But
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's nice to be able to get individual feedback on your own work, which is what we do with the school. And yeah, we try and make it accessible as far as like not having it too expensive and having it fairly short. So also, if you're
Mhm.
working full time, it's possible. You can just sort of stretch out the course as long as you need. So yeah,
Yeah. And it's so
there's
great because if you do that and you have like a foundation of knowledge, then there's so much you can learn just by actually going and doing game jams and like applying the information to that. Like, and then you're actually out meeting and befriending developers, and like that's who's probably gonna hire you later.
it.
I mean, it's not
Yeah,
that simple, but it's like a good way to do it, I
yeah.
think.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's why I'm glad that we've been able to run the Discord and have a good number of people sort of join in and contribute like in a great way to the discussions and foster community and stuff. Because I see that that's kind of like part of the role of the school, is to try and bring good folks together that are doing good stuff. So yeah. Um, all right. Let's see. Another question from Puckliuk. Both of us, how do you find those sustainable, healthy places to work at? I know a few companies I'd love to join, but Shell and Pit is so different and awesome from what I've looked into. Dot dot dot. Oh, that's nice.
Thank you. Um, well, yeah, that's a hard question because it is really challenging right now, and it has been, I think, in the industry for a while. I mean, I feel really lucky that I ended up here at a place that values that. Um, I am noticing more and more companies starting to place an emphasis on just being a healthy place to work. Um, and I think that's great. I think it's really good to keep an eye out for while when you're looking. But honestly, I don't really have advice on how to find those places. You can always reach out to us.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also one of the things too is that with this being a little bit more of a public forum, that we don't necessarily want to give critical feedback on either places that we've heard about and stuff like that. I tend to do that with students. I tend to be quite frank because I want people to succeed, and I'd rather them not waste a year or something at certain places, or basically trying to make their time as effective as possible. So it is kind of difficult to say like, oh yeah, do this or don't do that, but I think it is good to yeah, like and be involved in communities, either Discord or Slack or Twitter or whatever it might be. But yeah, of course, in-person stuff would be cool soon enough. Hopefully that'll happen again. And but yeah, you can definitely ask, people in the school's Discord about, a question like that if you have specific places that you're sort of interested in. And it is difficult because a lot of places will be like, well, we've got whatever, especially the larger ones, we've got this diversity initiative and this, that, and the other thing. And then when you talk to the people that actually work there, sometimes it can be a bit of a different story. But overall, the vibe is sort of changing either through, you know, um, like lawsuits or just through natural, healthy progression of things as well. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
More awareness.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's sort of the thing also that is changing just with it seems like with a lot of people leaving their jobs, like, in North America, anyways, the statistics are quite high because people are reevaluating what they want to do at work because work is a large part of life. And that is, the exact reason for that question. It's just like, where do you want to work that will really help support you and allow you to grow and be sustainable, not just for the work that you do, but like the product that you're putting out there too, so that that hopefully has connection and a resonance and sort of a holistic sort of effect sort of down the line too. So yeah, it's a
Yeah.
difficult question to ask sort of like or to answer in short, but I think the best thing
Hmm.
is to just pick a lot of people's brains and yeah,
Yeah, I think
sort of,
what you
yeah.
mentioned about becoming involved in communities is really good advice. I think that's what I often talk about in terms of just getting into the industry in general is fostering good relationships with people in the community, not just going to a meetup or an online thing and being like, "Can I work on your game?" But going and, just getting to know people and being interested in them and asking questions. And I think if you foster healthy relationships with those people, it'll like help lead towards working in healthy situations as well. Like if you meet people and you find out that they're good people and then you end up being able to work with them, that
Mm-hmm.
can help.
Yep, and those things will become easier because I think that those
Yeah,
things are
it's hard.
easier in person, but we do what we
Yeah.
can sort of in in the meantime. um, so this is from Noise Jockey, so that's Nathan. Question for M: when engaging with a client, how do you get your clients on board with a specific audio direction for a game? What's your process before you start recording, editing, and sharing sounds?
Um, I think the first thing is just asking a lot of questions, asking what how they want their game to make people feel, what the mood is of the game, definitely asking for references. And then I mean that's pretty much it. I find that often people don't have, sometimes they do, but more often they don't have a super strong opinion on what they want from the sound in particular. So they're kind of relying on us to create that for them. And I find often the best way is just to start making the sounds and commit to it and show them. I do try to show like a sample before I really get going and see, is this the direction? Especially with UI, I find UI is often communicates the theme or the vibe of the sound of the game. So I'll do text sounds first very frequently and see what they think of that. Um, but yeah, and then I also make sure never to. I think this was one of the most important pieces of advice I heard from a teacher once was never when you're delivering a sound to never say anything about the sound. Like never say, "Oh, here's my sounds." It could be a little bit more, I don't know, bigger or whatever. You just give them the sound and you don't say anything and then they can form their own opinion on it and tell you what they think based on just what it feels like to them rather than like influencing what they think of it.
Yeah, I think that is great advice because on the if you're just like this is the most amazing sound ever, then often you'll get people who are like, well, I'm not so sure about that. But if you're also just like, kind of, not that it sucks, but it's kind of like, well, I'm sort of thinking about this and then this, and then they're like, well, okay, so like, do you want me to listen to this? And like, I know that it's not
Yeah.
ready, and like, I guess that's a follow up question. Like, how do you deal with sort of draft sort of sounds where you're like, you are moving in a direction, but you're just like, these are temp, it's just so that we have something in there so that something triggers. And having both the thing that can happen in film where people get sort of, attached to the temp score or like the, temporary, sounds, or on the other side of things where it's just like, they're, you know, they don't necessarily know where it's kind of going. Like, how do you deal with sort of draft sounds?
Um, don't I try not to do a lot of draft sounds
Mm-hmm.
unless it's like usually if I'm doing temp sounds, it'll be near the end of the game when we just need to finish all the hookups before a certain time, so we'll stub sounds in. And I just I try not to bring attention to them. So I will often I'll say like these specific sounds, or I'll put it in the like asset list. Sometimes I'll even like tell them in the chat, and so they can see if they want, but I'll just kind of hope they don't notice. Because usually, if you bring attention to it, they will get attached to a specific sound. Sometimes temp sounds can be helpful, though. Often, they like when you start a game, they'll already have sounds in there, and that can be that can really help communicate what they're looking for. So, like in Goose Game, they already had a honk um, when I started because they had done their trailers and stuff already, and it was actually a quack. It was a duck that they had in there.
Uh-huh.
But I had to go through a lot of revisions to get my final honk sound as close to that as possible because that sound they had in there, even though it wasn't the highest quality sound and it wasn't, the appropriate animal, it was exactly what that game needed. It was um, part of the reason I think why the trailers did so well because it just like communicated this lack of emotion so that the players could put their own emotions into the honk. It was a very like monosyllabic short sound that could be really easily repeated and yeah, I think it was really helpful at first. um, I because they didn't actually give direction for the honk at first, so I just went nuts and I like found this goose library and
Mm-hmm.
goose geese can make really horrible sounds. So I thought it would be funny if like the goose did all this crazy screaming and hissing and it was all over the place. So that I guess that's an example of like doing something and having to get rid of it and just scale back to what the temp sound was. But I think it was definitely helpful to get there for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's sort of like, it can be a bit of a wandering goose road, you'll
Yeah.
know when you get there. And yeah, I think
Yeah.
it is important not to necessarily, like, when things are sort of in progress, to not necessarily shine light on that. It's kind of like the eco game that I'm working on is like a live game, and so, like, there's always releases, and it's, people play it, and then when there's updates, of course, people are going to be like, oh, what's about this and what about that. So I try to just use the sort of like bug reports as a way to go like, okay, well, we're getting a fair amount of like noise back and pushback on this particular thing, and I should polish that up. Whereas other things that I put in that I thought were temp, they just sort of continue on, and then I also find that I just get used to them too, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I should focus my efforts onto the whatever the fires that are happening. So
Yeah,
yeah.
totally.
Wow, man, we've got a good number of questions here. Okay, so okay, so Pukliak says it's awesome to hear about the shift in games being more of an artistic rather than commercial perspective. For a while, I felt so discouraged to get into sound design because it was commercial, or at least I felt that way. So, yeah. Question for Sen, I think, or Ken. If the client has a specific direction in mind regarding the general soundscape that's different than how you would approach it, how do you handle situations like that?
Um, yeah. Yeah, this has happened a couple times. I think it's important to try as hard as you can to listen and adapt to what clients are telling you. Um, and I think a lot of the time, things that seem like they're different are just different ways of communicating. So I try to uh, I just try to iterate, I would say. So if a client tells me some direction, I'll do my interpretation of that direction. So say someone wants some kind of like retro, more digital sound, which I'm not as used to doing. I tend to do more organic sound design. That's what comes more naturally to me. I'll I'll add elements of like both what my voice is and what they want, and then I'll pass that off to them and see if they like it. Again, I won't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be like, this is what I think you mean, and if they don't like it, I'll just scale back even more on what I want,
Mm-hmm.
because ultimately it is their game. So yeah, we have to we have to try to adapt, I think, as much as we can.
Yeah, I think to me the underline that I try to follow is that I try to own it. Like, even if it feels like I'm sort of bending over backwards to do something that I'm not, stylistically, or even just like whatever the final result, whatever it is. If it feels kind of weird to me, then I try to figure out a way to own it, so that I'm just like, no, like, I still have a piece of myself in there, so that I'm like, no, actually, they helped me. Maybe it was a circuitous route, but they helped me get to this spot that I wouldn't normally get to. And a lot of the times it is having that, humility to go like, wow, well, I learned something, and I wouldn't have
Yeah,
gotten there on my own. So I think that that's a good part of the process too, to just, yeah, to be, listening. uh,
totally.
yeah. Okay. And okay, Danny says, hi, I'm a friend of Mauricio's, and I'm a really big fan of your work. I would love to know how you decide what material to use when you record something for a sound effect.
Cool. Mauricio is a team member of Shell in the Pit.
Yeah, I think he might have also gone to the school, I think. So, might have.
um,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. Um,
Let's say maybe.
yeah, he's cool.
Oh,
Um,
Salinas. No, Salinas is yeah, I don't know if he works for you or not, but yeah.
no.
Nope. Okay, all right.
um, but yeah, so um, that is, I think, one of my favorite parts of recording and doing sound design is trying to imagine what materials we could use to record. Most of the time, that just involves. I partially really like it because it involves getting away from my desk, not staring at the screen. I just go and walk around my house. Often I go to the fridge or, the junk closet, and I'll just start touching things and like banging them against each other or doing whatever with them to find out what kinds of sounds they make. And I try to just look at like what's around me and let that influence uh, my choices rather than going for a specific thing that I know in my mind makes this certain sound. A lot of the time, I mean, depending on what kinds of sounds they are, I can go outside and take certain leaves from nature or whatever it is, and just yeah, it's mostly just letting whatever's around me inspire those sounds.
Nice. Yeah, sorry, I had to look it up because it was just like, oh my goodness, and it was a different student that had the same last name as Mauricio, but that was, sorry, Alfonso Salinas, I think, that went to the school. So there we go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, apologies for that, Mauricio.
Yeah.
I will also say, in my defense, I'm awful with names, so I do my best, but yeah, it can be a bit of a blur sometimes being a teacher, and also just, yeah, I do better, when I'm faces and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
anyways, okay, so we have more questions. Alex is asking, where could I find information on future game jams in Vancouver? Yeah, that one's fairly basic, but I mean, like you can just, it is one of those things you can just look up. There's like itch.io has like a crazy list of like game jams all around the world. That's the one that I send students to. I don't know. How do you find your game jams?
Yeah. I think that's a really good one. I always did the global game jam when they came here, but I don't know if that's happening right
It happened.
now.
Yeah, I think it
Is
happened,
it?
or it's happening now. It's like it's sort of a January-ish kind of like start of the year thing. So yeah,
Okay, cool. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, another question. We have one from. Oh no, I changed my window. Okay, let's get back there. Okay, this is from Sergio. Hi, Em. Thanks for sharing your experience. I was wondering how hard it was for you to get a job in the industry. Was networking very helpful for that? It can be discouraging sometimes not find a job, and it makes me question about my skills. Thanks.
um, yeah. I mean, it is just really hard. I won't like I try not to sugarcoat it because it's it is just something that like it takes a lot of work and you have to really really want it and like be willing to put a lot of work in, which was what happened for me. It was, I would say, because of networking and um, that just like being showing up really and being a part of the community and like making friends in that community. Like I was saying before, that's how I met my boss now, was just like, I think it was the Vancouver Sound Designers Meetup. They had a uh, night where you would go and show your work, and I went and then they would like critique it, and I went and showed my VFS final, which is another good thing that you can do if you're looking for work, is just take something and redesign the sound for it. And if you're doing that, I would say the a really good thing to do is choose a piece that is different. A lot of people tend to choose like, what are the ones? The Diablo trailers and I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I forget all the ones, but they're good. They're great to do sound to. It's just that so many people do them that it doesn't stand out as much. So I think I went on Vimeo and just like went through so many animations and just chose this weird animation to do. Um, and it's also important to choose something that is in line with the kind of work you want to do. So I wasn't going to do an action trailer or something like that. So I think that helped Gord know that my work would fit with the kind of work he wanted to do as well. Um, and also, so yeah, network, and I'm a little all over the place with this answer. Networking and doing a redesign like that can help, and also watching Real Talk is a really good resource. It's Power Up Audio. Kevin Regami from Power Up Audio does on Twitch this show called Real Talk, where he just goes over, often with a guest, someone's reel and website and gives advice, and it's really helpful, both to watch and to submit your work to.
Yeah, and Kevin's local to us here at VFS or Vancouver. He went to VFS as well,
Yeah.
and yeah, that was one of the things that we did at VFS was to do the final critique for the capstone kind of project, and so that
Mm-hmm.
format has kind of been taken online by Kevin, and yeah, he's got a lot of videos there from past guests, people that have done it. A lot of our students have done it and found it very helpful, and yeah, it's just nice to get because a lot of the times it's tricky to get access to. I mean, to get access to him is can be tricky, but it's also the guests that he brings on from the industry because they bring
Mm-hmm.
also like because when I give feedback on the the reels for the students, it's just one standpoint, and so that is something that might change in the future as well, where I might open it up a bit and try and bring in people from the industry to give their own subjective opinion as well, because the critique process, people will just listen into different things and people find different things important, but I think one of the key things that you touched on is just like basically present the work that you want to do. Don't just do something because you're like, oh, I think this is like technically difficult and this and that. So it's like, well, it's good to have something that's in the genre of the kind of work that you're interested in pursuing, like once you finish. Because if you do something that, like you kind of in a sense get pulled in for something that you don't necessarily want to do more of, that's not such a great thing. And I actually try and parallel that to like with students where they're like, well, do I have to code? And it's like, well, sure, you could get a job doing that, but do you really want to? Like, it's trying to figure out how to balance that as
Yeah.
well, working with
Have
games.
to like it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's part of the reason, like, I started out being a coder and I've kind of like moved. I still do coding. It's a nice skill to have, but it's not something that I want to do all the time. So even with the eco game, like, I can code stuff and I check stuff into Git, and then someone else cleans it up. Like, I don't have to get into all the details of like, oh man, we got to make sure the streaming works and this and throughput and like RAM and it's yeah, I like doing the creative stuff and I like helping people out, so that's also why I do the education side of things too. But yeah, it's hopefully things will get better with networking um, over the next little while. And yeah, just putting your stuff out there. Some students, they put out a lot of things. Akash Thakar also got a Discord that has been great for students, where one of the principal things that he says is just like keep putting stuff out there, and then that way you build like a portfolio and like building your brand and stuff like that, so people can really know who you are by the stuff that you put out, and you increase your putting yourself out there is kind of like a thing that almost needs to be done more so than in the past these days. But the nice thing is that there's more jobs out there than ever before in game audio, at least from what I can see. So yeah, chances are going up. We had a couple. Oh, Sabrina asks, what's a typical work day like for you?
Um, yeah. Well, I don't know if I really have like a typical work day, because I work on a lot of games at the same time, so it usually fluctuates between I mean, I always start the day with checking all the Slacks and all the Discords or whatever channels the teams have, and just seeing who needs immediate attention. And then after that, try to I try to prioritize my work based on deadlines, obviously, and then also just how much developer is like engaging and asking for certain sounds, and working on things in a fluctuating way like that. And like once I've done a project or so for a while and um, they have sounds that they're happy with, moving on to the next project that needs attention. And in terms of what the actual tasks are, it ranges from uh, getting captures, mixing, giving feedback and direction, doing actual sound design, recording, implementing, watching Unreal crash. Um,
Uh,
and yeah, all of those things are kind of all over the place. But I like that. I like not having a specific routine. It kind of keeps me engaged, I think.
nice. Yeah, with you saying watching Unreal Crash, there was a tweet a while back that it showed there's the cat, the white-headed, like haired cat that's like, like bobbing, and then it shows shaders compiling. It's something
Yeah.
when working with Unreal, it's just like, oh my gosh, how many times do you need to compile these shaders? But it does
Oh,
look nice once that they're done.
yeah.
So, yeah, yeah, I work a fair amount in Unreal as well, trying to help some students out with Metasound stuff. And I might be doing some other, stuff outside the school with Unreal as well. So we have a question from Victor, and we're gonna be pretty close to finishing up questions here, just so that we don't take up too much of your time. So Victor asks, "Hi, I'm wondering if you have a good tip or technique to help you get started when you're stuck on a sound."
Yeah. I saw a really interesting poll on Twitter the other day that was asking, I forget who tweeted it, but it was asking how people sound design, if they do additive sound design or reductive sound design. And I was interested in that because I never really thought about it, but I'm very much in the reductive sound design camp, which I think was even the minority on that poll. And so what that means is when I have a sound, I mean, let's just say it's not a sound I'm going to record, because that one's a more simple process. I record it and I experiment with in the real world. And I don't really get stuck as much when I'm doing that. But if I'm looking in libraries, I'll take some time and I'll go through the libraries and pull out all the sounds into my session that relate or that I think sound like what they could be, what the sound could be. And then I just get rid of, I layer them all up and I hear it with all of the sounds at once. And then I get rid of whatever doesn't work. And I think doing that means that I don't often get stuck, because it's it's I can't imagine doing it the other way. Like I feel like I
Mm-hmm.
would get stuck a lot the other way if I was only trying to find the one good sound. I think maybe I just need to try doing that more. But yeah, I think that would be my tip. I mean, I do get stuck even doing that sometimes, and I guess what I would do in that case is just take a break from it and move on and do something else and get back to it. Sometimes it's just like hard to be creative all the time and you can't force yourself. So taking a break is a big one.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's great advice. I like that approach, and I think, yeah, when I saw that tweet as well, I was kind of like, huh. I think
Yeah.
I do it kind of both ways to, but depending on like when I've worked on Retro City Rampage, which is more like synthesis kind of stuff, and that was kind of like more where it's just like you know, it's very limited, so you only have sort of one direction. You try that out and you try a different thing. But I do the similar thing of what you're saying, where you sort of grab, you know, like a palette of possibilities or a grab bag or
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it, and then like throw stuff out that doesn't fit. So that's more of this sort of subtractive kind of reductionist kind of approach. And yeah, but the question itself was something funny because I was like, huh, it's kind of in design. There's sort of like top-down design or bottom-up design, and so I
Hmm.
was used to that as a theory, but not necessarily within sound design. Oddly enough, so it was cool to see people's responses primarily. See what was
Yeah,
like,
yeah, it was
what
super
are other
interesting.
people doing?
I was so surprised that most people weren't doing the same thing I was doing.
Yeah. I think we have one more question here. So the question being, okay, to your earlier point on being part of the community and showing up, how can you do that during these times, especially here in Vancouver, X Vitor?
Um, yeah, it's just so hard right now. It like I think one thing is really like giving yourself like I don't know, not being too hard on yourself right now because it's just so hard in general. I think a lot of people say have a lot of issues with Twitter, and that's fine. But I feel like it is a really good resource for game audio and especially indie games. There's just a lot of people showing what they're creating on there, and I think it's really cool that you can interact with people. A lot of people have their DMs open. um, I think if you have to put a lot of effort into making it into a productive resource because it really wants to suck you in and distract you. But if you do that, if you mute all the words that you don't want, it can be really great. And Discord is another big one. And yeah, I mean the School of Video Game Audio Discord is a resource. Um, What other Discords are there? There's a
uh,
bunch of them. There's the
yeah,
ones you were mentioning.
yeah. There's a sound effect. There's Akash's Discord. There's also I think Blip Sounds. I've heard good stories from them. Yeah, those things are kind of, and also the game audio Slack, which I'm not part of, but I've heard that's a great resource too. It's been around for a while. Um, yeah, on the
We have,
Twitter side of, oh, sorry.
oh, sorry. Just speaking of Slacks, we have there's an audio treehouse for people who are diverse genders, um, which is really nice community.
Nice. Yeah, it's important to have a space, you know, because
Hmm.
yeah, you know, over time, this is something that you know, I think Damien joined in a while back. I'm not sure if he's still on, but it is something that I've talked to him personally about, and other people in the community. Where back in the day, like, you know, I've been doing this since the 90s, and there was just way more of a dude vibe back then. There still is now, and we've gotten better with it. And I think the Twitter, you know, the hashtag game audio sort of Twitter community and sound design community in general has been just bending over time in a positive direction, which I find really nice. One of the things I use Twitter a fair amount for the, you know, for the school, and one of the things that I do is I actually use the uBlock Origin ad blocker to block out like the suggested stuff in the news and stuff, so I don't even see it because I find that yeah, I can be like a little clicky. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm reading this thing, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, those are the people that I know, and then oh, what happened down in the United States? Oh my goodness! And then it's just like, you know, half an hour later. So I actually like, you know, block that stuff out on a technical level. So I think that
Hmm.
it's good to sort of see how the tools are useful for you and how, you know, you can engage with those to do what you need to do, and hopefully not get too distracted because there's a whole huge world out there, and like, yeah, trying to connect with people online is, yeah, it's difficult, and I think it just takes time, and I think it's good to be um, to also when you approach those kind of things. I know sometimes I think people are like, oh, networking, I'm gonna like put my name out there, and it's just like, I think it's more just being a little bit more relaxed about it and going like, hey, maybe there's something that I can help people out with, and it doesn't necessarily need to, lead to something huge right now, even if it's just sort of exchanging ideas rather
Making
than
friends.
exactly, yeah, and just connections and just, it's sort of like in small talk too, where it's just like, hey, we're in the sound design, whatever chat thing, but I mean, when we were, whatever, doing the sound check, I mean, we sort of touched on like topics like camping and stuff like that, and getting outside and getting away from the
Mhm.
computer, because like those kind of things are, I don't know, it just it's something that's, I think it promotes a like a healthier connection than just like, oh, it has to all be about
Yeah.
sound design. So yeah.
Yeah, you definitely have to be careful. I've found I have to be very careful with Twitter on my phone. I've gone
Mm.
through so many cycles where I delete it and then I start using it on the browser and then I reinstall it and then I delete it again. And I've started to, my current strategy is I just am like not carrying my phone around the house, or
Mm-hmm.
like I just leave it in the bag, or I just don't, I try not to look at it, which is also hard, but it's helping more than trying to manage what I'm doing on my phone.
Yeah, yeah, these are sort of, I don't know, there's a term for it, but anyways, it's sort of this idea of like just being very mindful about one's use of technology, because it's
Hmm.
if you're not, then you can lose a lot of time, and the thing that I've found over years is that it's not just sort of time and effort, but it's also focus, and I think that focus is like a
Hmm.
really important resource that we just haven't sort of looked into in a lot of depth, and I find that that's sort of another sort of third element that I really try to manage as a scarce resource is my focus, because my focus usually sort of peters out over time. It goes with
It's
energy
good,
and whatnot,
yeah.
so yeah.
You really have to fight for it
Hmm.
these days with everything just being designed to distract you. I'm reading something right now that talks about the importance of white space in your
Hmm.
day and
Hmm.
in your work, where you just are okay with having, and you just deliberately plan unscheduled time where you don't have to do anything, and taking time away from your Twitter phone or whatever it is has helped me get a lot of focus back by doing that, I think. And you kind of have to be creative of when you have it. Like we were talking about software crashing, and like I've started to try being the keyword to just like take those moments to, like take a breath and look out the window. uh,
Yeah, yeah, I
and
think
yeah,
that,
I find it helpful.
yeah, that reminds me of sort of the, the John Lennon slash Beatles thing, where it's just like, life is what happens at, like a red light. And that's sort of our version of a red light is like when our
Yeah.
tools crash. And yeah, yeah, I think
Yeah.
it is interesting. And like, anyways, I think this is a very big topic as well. It's
Yeah.
something that I try to pursue because, we both work from home at this point. And so it's very important to have like just whatever work life and health balance, and that feeds into
Hmm.
all of the other stuff that you were talking about earlier. So yeah, cool. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll wrap things there. I'm gonna put up your contact information here, and for people that are interested in asking additional questions, what we can do is you can go into the live event chat and ask questions there. Um, we don't necessarily, for Em, I know you probably need to get your workday and stuff started, but what we can do is that over time or whatever, we can figure out a way to forward those to you.
Yeah.
And then I've put your information up here on the screen. So we've got her website is at maudible.com. And then also Twitter, which we're talking about, is at maudible.
I think my website actually might be. Is it still working? I haven't looked at it in a long time.
Well, it just forwards you to a shell in the pit, which is fine.
Okay.
I wanted to put it there in case the
Yeah, yeah.
whatever in the future and stuff like that, because this video might be around for a little bit of time. So
Yeah, I was thinking of one
yeah,
day getting back to it. But my Twitter is where I usually post stuff, and sometimes my SoundCloud, which I think is just also Inaudible.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Well, I guess what we'll do is we'll wrap it up there. And so, yes, thank you so much, Em. This has been awesome. I've been,
Yeah.
it's hard to sort of put a, like an end to it, but all good things
Mhm.
must end. And I really, really do appreciate your time. And yeah, we're getting some great comments through the chat. And there was like it's interesting seeing all the whatever statistics from YouTube, and it looks like it
Mhm.
worked out. So thanks for spending the extra time doing the sound check as well. So this has
Yeah.
been super fun. I'm Leonard Paul, and this is School of Video Game Audio, sort of Q&A where we bring in folks to chat with, and people in the audience can ask them questions about things to do about game audio. And so yeah, thank you very much for your time and all the great answers and knowledge and wisdom and stuff that you've been sort of shared with us over the past hour and a bit.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess we'll say goodbye to everybody. And yep, check us out in the School of Video Game Audio Discord in the live event chat. And yeah, we can put more of M's contact information there. So yes, thanks so much. And I'm glad this seemingly worked out on YouTube and will eventually, make it public for other folks to watch as well. So thanks again. Okay. Bye.